Tonight, on Icons Radio Hour, actress Arlene Dahl, whose diverse film career includes such musicals as Three Little Words with Fred Astaire and My Wild Irish Rose, westerns that include Ambush with Robert Taylor and The Outriders with Joel McCrea, film noir classics like Slightly Scarlet and The Black Book, and Jules Verne's sci-fi fantasy Journey to the Center of the Earth with James Mason and Pat Boone.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Icons Radio Hour. The program is presented by Moda Entertainment. Each week, we feature live interviews with those who knew classic Hollywood best. Your hosts are author Stephen Bogart and writer, director, and film historian John Mulholland. And here are your hosts, Stephen Bogart and John Mulholland.
Thank you, Jody, and welcome back, listeners, to this week's edition of Icons Radio Hour. And John, we have an intriguing interview this week.
Certainly do. Arlene Dahl, one of the most gorgeous women ever to grace the so-called silver screen, and it's something that I'd like to touch on with her. I'm sure we will, because she was also a very talented actress and often wasn't given the chance, because of her red hair and extraordinary looks, to perhaps showcase that talent.
So without further ado, let's take a break and let's come back and talk to the wonderful and lovely Arlene Dahl. And we'll be back right after this.
Play it. The stuff that dreams are made of.
Icons is a new monthly magazine based on larger-than-life personalities from the golden age of Hollywood. From Humphrey Bogart to Katharine Hepburn, to Gene Kelly to Lauren Bacall, Icons has the stuff you'll find in no other magazine. The inside stuff, the stuff that dreams are made of. Icons. They are forever.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
To order your subscription to Icons Magazine, visit us on the web at iconsmagazine.com or call us toll-free at 888-30-ICONS.
Welcome back to Icons Radio, listeners, and we have a wonderful interview today. We're going to be talking to the wonderful Arlene Dahl. She's an extraordinarily versatile talent. She's worked in musicals, westerns, film noir, sci-fi. She's worked with people like Van Johnson, Fred Astaire, Debbie Reynolds, Rock Hudson, Lauren Bacall, and I'm so happy to have you here with us, Arlene.
It's my pleasure.
And let me ask you one thing. You go to Warner Brothers, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. You go to Warner Brothers. It's your first day at Warner Brothers, and you get asked to lunch by a guy named Gary Cooper?
That's correct. I just came right from the plane from New York and met my agent, who I'd never seen before, at the airport, and he took me to Warner Brothers right from the airport, dropped off the luggage at the Vine Lodge, and walked through the gates at Warner Brothers, and I see this tall, rather attractive man who looks vaguely familiar walking toward me. And as he got closer, I realized, I caught my breath, I realized it was Gary Cooper. And my agent said, would you like to meet him? So he introduced us, and Gary invited me to lunch.
And how was that? I mean, you know, you're a starry-eyed girl, Miss Rheingold, and which people may or may not know, and you're invited to lunch by one of the great stars in Warner Brothers. I mean,
well, as I said, I had to catch my breath. It was like the most exciting thing that had happened in my life so far. He took me to the commissary, the executive commissary, where there was Ronald Reagan and Alexis Smith and Joan Crawford, and it was just, I was surrounded by stars, and there were stars in my eyes as well as seated next to me, and he introduced me to everyone. So that was a momentous occasion for me.
You know, that sounds like the Gregory Peck once told the story. He had been out in Hollywood for around a year, and he was at a party, and he was very shy and was in a corner, and no one was talking to him, and suddenly there was a man standing next to him, and he did a double take, and it was Gary Cooper. And Cooper just chatted with him for half an hour, introduced him to everybody. He said it's something that he never forgot. So that doesn't surprise me, what you just told me.
Well, he was he became a close friend, he and Rocky, and he was one of the nicest people, nicest human being in Hollywood, let alone a big star.
Yeah, that's what you always hear, and that's not always the case,
Isn't that nice? It's always the biggest ones that are the nicest.
Maybe they have the confidence. Your musical, My Wild Irish Rose, being of Irish extraction, I naturally love to listen to the songs and that, and unfortunately by midday on March 17th, I'm in no condition to really listen to them.
Of course not.
But as much as I enjoy it, when I watch that again, I'm very uneasy. There's an awful lot of minstrel stuff in it.
Yes, it was not politically correct at that point in 1946 when it was made.
Right, and
it was released in 47, but we made it in 46. It usually took for a musical about a year, to get everything right.
Yeah, it's great color in it and everything, but it's
Technicolor.
Which
was the best.
Yes.
And I had just come from the New York stage. I had been in my first musical on Broadway, and Jack Warner saw me there and asked me to come to Hollywood to make a screen test. I, of course, told him I had a run-of-the-play contract, so I was very sorry I couldn't come. However, he said, well, I'll give it 14 days and then you'll call me. And he was right. It did not make it past 14 nights. So I did call him because my modeling career, it was the summer and my modeling career was on hiatus. So I decided to go to Hollywood and take a little vacation at their expense. And I intended to come back, and I never did. I mean, I did from time to time, but I was signed to a 7-year, as they call it, slave labor contract.
I'm going to give a little rundown of your career here, Arlene, because there are certain things that strike me, and then we can go into the individual films. It seems that you started out in musicals, comedies. Fluff isn't the right word, but at a certain point...
One-dimension characters, would you say?
Yeah. And then they weren't taking advantage of your talent. And then suddenly it seems like you switched, and you were playing James Cain heroines and dark film noir characters. And I'd like to get into that switch as we go along. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, how your career in the mid-50s...
Oh, yes. I certainly thought about it a lot. I love beautiful clothes, of course, being a model in New York. I love beautiful clothes and modeled them for covers and inside spreads in the magazines and so on. I was the first Clairol girl, as a matter of fact, because I was a natural redhead, so I was practically bald in New York when they kept getting snippets of my hair to dye a certain color, make a certain color red. But coming to Hollywood, I loved clothes. I loved Technicolor. When I switched from Warner Brothers to MGM, Mayer was my great mentor, and wanted me to only make Technicolor movies. And if it had been up to him, that's all I would have made. And of course, Technicolor movies are not, they don't have great mind-boggling character parts, They're usually beautiful, glorious color, hairdos, clothes, wonderful, fluffy, one-dimensional characters. And that was my beginning. But eventually, I was able to get a role or two tossed my way that I could get my teeth into, like Slightly Scarlet. I had to change studios to do it. That was at RKO.
Yeah, I understand. Tell me if this story is true. I read that the reason that you ended up going to MGM from Warner's was that Jack Warner forgot to renew your contract?
He was losing his shirt in Monte Carlo. And my contract he was the only one that could renew it, because I signed directly with him. And I had a very good agent who said, well, I bet he's not coming back from Monte Carlo in time to renew your contract. And so Metro had been trying to borrow me for a film with June Allison and Van Johnson called The Bride Goes Wild. And so my agent called MGM and said, listen, I doubt whether on Monday Jack Warner's going to be back. You know, he spent the weekend losing his money. He's going to want to recoup before he comes back, and he's the only one that can renew her contract. Why don't we say that she'll be available on Tuesday morning? So this was a Thursday before that fateful Monday. And so I really was under contract to both studios at the same time. He worked out the price. I had fittings for my costumes, and I began work for Tuesday morning at MGM in The Bride Goes Wild.
That's a tremendous story.
That's quite a switch.
What did Warner say to you when he came back?
What happened?
Because Louis B. Mayer really wanted you at that time.
Louis B. Mayer happened.
That's exactly right.
They kept refusing to loan me because they didn't know whether they had a pig in a poke or what, because my film had not been released yet, and would have been until the following week. So I was a victim of circumstance, happily.
Well, you meant the movie Bride Goes Wild with Van Johnson. When I watch that, I'm reminded of, in some ways, the Rock Hudson, Doris Day comedies. And
yes. Only it had a little boy who stole the picture.
Yes, but
a little butch.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's because of Rock Hudson and Van Johnson and what we eventually learned about them in the public, but it's the virginal woman. It's an interesting. I don't know if that's ever occurred to you watching it, but the interplay.
No, but that's an interesting thought. It hadn't occurred to me until now, but they were both, let's say, light comedy.
Yes.
And they were both very, very good. I worked with both of them. I worked with Van twice and Rock only once, but we became very good friends.
Yeah. Also, around that time, you did you did two westerns, but one called Ambush. Do you remember that? Sam Wood directed it.
Yes, indeed I did. And Sam never lived to do another film. That was his undoing. He went on location with Robert Taylor. I didn't go on a location. That was not for me. It was the desert, and it took a toll on the director's health, and he died shortly thereafter. But it was my first Western. I wouldn't call my Southern Yankee picture with Red that came directly before that a Western, although it took place in the South. But and I had some horse. It made horse sense. I had to ride a horse at that. But it was my first Western, and I must say Robert Taylor was fantastic. He was such a gentleman, and I was starry-eyed. Talk about starry-eyed. I had finally worked up enough gumption to tell him the day before the end of the film that I had 2 years before in high school sent for a 8x10 glossy signed by him. And he said, really? And here I am playing his leading lady. And he said, did I send it back? And I said, well, it was signed and by Robert Taylor. I don't know if it was your signature. Well, the next day in my dressing room, there were 4 dozen yellow roses, tea roses, which were my favorites. A big sterling silver 8x10 frame with his picture in it, and a wonderful dedication, and a little package next to it, wrapped as a gift. I opened it. First I read the card, and it said, Garbo gave me this on the set of Camille to bring me luck, and I'm giving it to you for the same reason. Love, Bob. And I unwrapped it, and it was a fabulous ivory carved Buddha that you could hold in your hand. I still have it. But that's the kind of wonderful person Robert Taylor was.
Oh, what a lovely story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I find fascinating, was that your first black and white film?
No, the first black and white film was the one, oddly enough, that Mayer borrowed me for, which was The Bride Goes Wild. Then I was borrowed by Walter Wanger for my second film, which was called The Black Book, or Reign of Terror, as it originally was called. I don't know how much they got for me, but I certainly never saw any extra in my paycheck. But that was my second movie, and the third one was Southern Yankee with Red Skelton, a comedy. And then the fourth one was Ambush with Robert Taylor. And they were all black and white.
Well,
in spite of Mayer's wish to have me only filmed in Technicolor.
Right. Well, what's good about this, especially Black Book and Ambush, is that you can concentrate on your performance.
Yes.
As opposed to the red hair, like in Outriders with Joel McRae. You're aware of your hair in the wagon train.
And it was that long, too.
The Black Book is just an underrated film. It's like film noir, but it takes place during the French Revolution.
Yes, and the character actors were stupendous. They were just fantastic. Tony Mann directed that right after he got such great notices for T-Men. And the sets were done by William Cameron Menzies, and Walter Wanger put all of his talents in this film. It was very well researched, the music and everything. And of course, working with Tony Mann as a director, it was the first time that anybody had ever given me a backstory of the character I was playing, or asked me what I thought. I mean, they were most of the directors, including Sam Wood, were mostly ushers. This way, Miss Dahl, make your marks, stand on your mark this way. They were ushers. This was the first time that I had been asked what I thought of the character, how I intended to play it, and a backstory, what made her the way she was. Well, so I learned a lot from Tony Mann and from Walter Wanger. As a matter of fact, Walter Wanger gave me my trademark. Up until that point, most of the black and white glossies that were sent out, taken in the studio gallery and sent out of me, erased my beauty spot, which was right by the corner of my mouth. Well, Wanger said, that makes her different. Let's play it up. So he had a contest throughout the country about who had a beauty spot on the right-hand side of the lips. Let's bring them to Hollywood and have dinner and so on. And he finally, because of this trademark that he really thought of himself, I had postcards and letters directed to the lips and a mole, Hollywood, California, and I got it. So it's funny how things happen. It's really strange how things happen to make your career important, and the creative people who think of these ideas.
I wanted to ask you something about that. Luella Parsons said once that you and Elizabeth Taylor were the only two actresses who can step in front of a camera with no makeup and look gorgeous.
Elizabeth and I both would say over our dead body. We had a natural beauty that took us an hour to do in the morning.
I love that.
But we had good skin. That's if you have a good canvas to work on, it's pretty important.
Absolutely. My question to you is, how do you think being as beautiful as you are and were impacted your career? I mean, how long did it take you before you're really able to get, and I don't like to use the words get past that, but kind of in your profession, you get pigeonholed into something, and there's Arlene.
To be noted for something other than that?
Yeah.
First of all, I'm grateful to my parents for giving me what they've given me. It's their DNA. I can take no credit for that. It's maintaining it that takes a bit of practice and knowledge. And I wrote a beauty column for 20 years, interviewing stars on how they kept their looks and so on. And I've written 50 books on the subject. So it has helped me rather than harmed me. I'm not going to regret it at all. It opened the door for me because I had nobody in the business. My parents were Lutherans, and I would have been, if I hadn't left Minneapolis, probably in China, doing good work for the Lutherans. But I was I was touched by an angel, I think, and very lucky. I mean, all the stories we've talked about came to me without my lifting a finger. And part of it was because they liked the way I looked, and I photographed well. You know, you can be beautiful in person, but unless that camera loves your face, you're out on a limb. And so I don't regret that at all. It took me a while to get past it, yes. I worked at it. I had good agents, and they got me some good parts, finally, after I left Metro. But I had to leave Metro before that happened.
Yeah, I can believe that. My father, of course, was in the same position as a gangster at some point. You know.
I know.
How many gangsters can you play? You have to be able to act at some
and
point.
So well.
Yeah.
He pigeonholed himself.
Oh yeah, he did. And you know, and I know about your beauty. You know, you wrote for the Chicago Tribune. I'd like to just mention one thing about that. Very interesting for our listeners. You asked Marilyn Monroe why she wears clear nail polish and clear toe polish, and she says, "Because I like to feel nude all over." I thought that
exactly.
was.
I wanted that to be the headline, but my syndicated column with the Chicago Tribune, they were very traditional, and they did mention it at the end, but the headline was not, "I like to feel nude all over." They paraphrased it and took the bite out of it.
I'll bet.
You know, you mentioned Anthony Mann, Arlene, and when you were making that, were you aware of that this is one talented man?
Oh, absolutely. I wish I could have made all my films with him. I would have learned so much more. And I forgot to mention that John Alton, who had just finished writing a book called Painting with Light, he was the cinematographer from Argentina and a good friend of Fernando Lamas, who I eventually made a picture with and married. But he was a great friend of Fernando, and eventually won what I thought he should have done much earlier, won an Academy Award for his cinematography. And he was at home in black and white, which this was when I did the film for Walter Wanger, The Black Book. He was a cameraman, he was the cinematographer, and we became good friends. And I was so happy that he finally got his due by winning an Academy Award, because he was I've never been photographed better than he did on that film.
Yeah, well, then he did Slightly Scarlet too, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
yes. But I played an entirely different part in that.
Yes,
I played a kleptomaniac, maniac. I mean, I had all the maniacs down, and a jailbird to boot. So it wasn't as glamorous a part as I played it as a countess in the French Revolution, but he captured everything I wanted him to capture in that. All of my uncertainty, all of my childlike things that I had to show, and all of my kleptos.
Yeah, I'd say he did a lot of things for, I think, Minnelli.
Yes, Vincent Minnelli, right, at Metro.
Yes, I think Designing Woman, in fact, with Steve's mother.
Ah, yes.
In fact, that's what he might have won the Academy Award for, I don't know.
April in Paris, I think it was.
Was it April in Paris? And then he did Battle
Kelly
Circus with Steve's father. I think he's cinematographer on that.
Battle Circus. I remember that one.
Now, we haven't talked about my film with your mother.
Well, we will. I got
Betty
notes.
Bacall.
Absolutely. I have notes, and directed by Jean Negulesco. I'm sure you know Jean and Dusty.
Well, I tell you, Jean Negulesco had a field day on that, because June Allison, who I worked with before, was in the film, as well as your mother, Lauren Bacall, and we were the three women, against the men, trying to make our man win the prize, which was the big job that Clifton Webb was offering in the automobile business. Well, Jean Negulesco was a Romanian flirt, and very artistic. He was a designer, set designer, a cinematographer. He was so artistic, and he did a drawing of each of us, one-line drawing, which he was famous for. By the end of the film, he had done one from each of us, and he flirted with each of us differently, and he took us each separately to lunch, to talk to us, not necessarily about the film, but just to get a feeling of our character so he could get that in the line drawing that he was doing. And I still have mine. I don't know if your mother still has hers, but I'm sure that we all appreciated working with Jean, who gave us a lot of laughs.
Well, interestingly enough, he was fired, he was replaced on the Maltese Falcon after a couple of months by John Huston, and now he's directing you and my mother in Woman's World. And interestingly enough, of course, Jean and Dusty were great friends of the family for a while. I remember.
Yes.
And yeah.
He married Dusty, who was one of the top models in New York that I had met very briefly before I came to Hollywood.
Right.
So we became, Dusty and Jean became good friends of ours too.
I pulled an interview. I pulled a review, a 1954 review of Woman's World. And one of the things it says some movies are wonderful because they look so expensive. And that is one of the biggest charms of Woman's World. And it talks about you as being powerfully seductive. But I think that the movie, it talks about the flashy automobiles and especially about the New York City location. And I just wonder how you felt about that. Right, the background.
And if you look at the car today, the car that is in the film that was, I believe it was 1954, something like that.
Yes.
It could be on the street today, and you could buy it as a new car. I mean, and it's more beautiful than what's on the street today, I think.
Oh,
so they had a prototype that was way ahead of the time.
I've got to think that you guys got along really well.
As you know, your mother has a very dry sense of humor, which appeals to me no end. And so we got together and talked about June Ellison. And your mother had she made a portrait in words of June Allison that had me falling on the floor. It was so accurate and so funny. And it did not denigrate June by any means, but it was funny and right on. And then, of course, I don't know whether you know this, but I did Applause on Broadway, the same part that she introduced in Applause, Eve Harrington. I followed her into the Palace Theater in New York, and she came to see me, and she said, "Well, you're holding up?" And I said, "Yes, I love it. I celebrate every night. I just adored it." And Ann Baxter, who had also done the role, I found when I went back to see her, she had a calendar on the wall that with red ink, she would cross off the days until she could leave the show. She was so afraid the dancers were going to drop her when they threw her up in the air. And that was exhilarating for me. And I'm sure for your mother, too.
Oh yeah, but it's so difficult, those 8 shows a week, and she did mention that, and she said that she happened to tell me that she loved you in it, because of course your great desire was to be in musicals anyway.
Of course, I wanted to be a musical star on Broadway. That's why I went to New York. I did not go to Hollywood. I went to New York, and I kept coming back. I played Roxanne opposite Joe Ferrer in Cyrano on Broadway. I did Applause. I kept coming back because that's really where my heart was.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. I'm glad that you and my mom got along. Listen, Arlene.
Oh, we did.
I'm sure you did.
She's 1 in a million.
Oh yeah, don't I know that?
Gritty, and she works, and she doesn't make any bones about wanting to work and where are the parts. She should have won an Academy Award for one of the films she did recently.
Oh, I know.
I voted for her.
Oh God,
I nominated her and I voted for her because I've been a member of the Academy for a long time.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was Mirror Has Two Faces, and
that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Well, we're going to take a little break here, and we'll be right back after this short break.
3 little words. Oh, what I'd give for that wonderful.
Icons is a new monthly magazine based on larger-than-life personalities from the golden age of Hollywood. It's about passion, about style, about mystery. It's all about love, about glamour, about history, the movie biz, and its biggest stars. And not just any stars, but the true icons of the industry. Icons. They are forever.
He's looking at you, kid.
To order your subscription to Icons Magazine, visit us on the web at iconsmagazine.com or dial toll-free 888-30-ICONS.
And we're back talking to the wonderful Arlene Dahl. And Arlene, let me ask you something, get something right out of the way right now.
Yes.
1948, you had a couple of dates with a guy that people may have known, a guy named John Kennedy.
Oh, yes.
And
years of dates, actually.
what was he like? I mean, he seemed like he was a nice guy.
He was one of the most remarkable, one of the most articulate young men I've ever met. He was the youngest senator in the United States when I first met him. And his father, Joe Kennedy, set up our date, so to speak. And it took, and we saw each other over a span of 2 years, and we went to parties together. He couldn't really dance, and I loved to dance. But he made up for that in every other way. I mean, he should have been a diplomat, because he had a great sense of humor. He had a great sense of justice. I introduced him to the Shah of Iran at one of Jack Warder's parties, and listened to them. It was like being a fly on the wall. I listened to them when Jack became president, how they would work together, and I lived to see this happen. And I tell you, that was one of the great moments that I remember. You hear about Hollywood parties, but this was really one of the top moments of my career as a party goer.
Ooh, that sounds like a party worthy of page 6, huh? Arlene, in 1950, you did a Western with Joel McCrea called The Outriders. Now, McCrea was one of these actors who allegedly only played themselves. They weren't acting, which of course is ridiculous. But as a stage-trained performer, what was it like to work with McCrea, who started right in film?
He was one of the nicest. He and Bob Taylor were two of the nicest people I've ever worked with in the film business. And I had a mad crush on him. This was my first location. We went to Kanab, Utah. I went with my cousin Elna. She was my chaperone, I guess. And I tell you, I had such a crush on him, and I understand from his sons that he had a crush on me as well. But he was married to one of the most beautiful women in the world on the screen, Frances D. And, I just had to swallow my devotion to him and put it on the screen. Because, I mean, you look at the close-ups of me looking at Joel, and you see it written all over my face. I think he's the best thing since sliced bread.
Well, Joel McCrea is another example of one of those who's so underrated. You look at his career, what he did, and he's never been fully appreciated for being the actor that he was.
Well, he could do everything. He could ride a horse and make it look real. He could romance a woman, and every woman in the audience felt it. He was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Perhaps that's why I had such a big crush on him, because he was one of the most extraordinary, not only people that I met, but actors that I've acted with.
Well, speaking of extraordinary, at the same time you did a musical with Fred Astaire, Three Little Words.
But now there's another gem. I knew him socially. We used to go to parties at the Goldwyn's and Jack Warner's and Charles and Elsie Mendel's, and I was very social in those days. I barely had time to work.
Why not?
But Fred Astaire became a good friend when we were having to see a private showing at Goldwyn's house after dinner of The Red Shoes. And I'm sure you've been to these private screenings at the producer's or director's house of another film that they didn't make. The ladies can make catty remarks about the stars, and the men can be shifted back and forth and criticized. And Fred and I were sitting next to each other, and when we saw The Red Shoes and heard all these catty remarks about this redhead showing her backside and why don't she cover it up and all that sort of thing, Fred looked at me and he said, "I don't care what they say, this is going to be a classic." And I was so happy to hear that, because that was my feeling too. I really loved the Red Shoes, in spite of all the conversation to the contrary that was going on sotto voce in the room. And he asked me if I danced, and I gave him my background, having studied dance since I was 5, I believe. And so I think he was responsible for my doing Three Little Words. And not only that, but he was on the set during my rehearsal and during the filming of it, and gave me his choreographer, Hermes Pan, to do the dance number and the music number, and to work with the cameraman to photograph it. And he was extraordinary. He was an extraordinary friend, a gentleman, and I just adored him.
And as a young woman, being opposite Fred Astaire like that on screen, what did that feel like, given his 20 years of excellence preceding it?
Well, I was in awe, absolutely in awe of him. If we hadn't met socially, I think I would have stuttered every time I tried to speak to him. But he had put me at such ease, you know, at dinner parties, and with just that conversation about the Red Shoes, you know, we were on the same wavelength. And he really helped me with my number, you know, giving me a number in his film by myself. It was it was better than winning the Academy Award to me. And then being on the set, not only for rehearsal, but for the filming every day. Because it took about a week to do that number, to pre-record it and to do it. He was wonderful. He was just absolutely marvelous.
Did you push after that, Arlene, for other musicals?
Oh, yes. But at that time, it was close to 1951. And in 1951, when I was on a honeymoon with Rex Barker, I came back to find that my mentor, L.B. Mayer, had left the studio. Whether he was fired or resigned, I don't know. And Dory Sherry, who was known as the kitchen sink director, actor, producer. For those in the audience who don't know what kitchen sink actors and actresses are, they're in black and white and they're standing at the kitchen sink with great problems. That's the story. So musicals had to be put on the back burner. They were too expensive. Dory was brought in to cut the cost. So the first to go were musicals. So I was put in one black and white film after that, after another. I did one again with Van Johnson called, can't remember the title now, but it was a film noir, and then 2 others, and I asked my agent to get me out of my contract because I was really not happy. So the next films, he got me a contract at Paramount for 3 films, one at Fox, one at Universal. So I was on my way. I was released from my contract at Metro and started 2 weeks later in Paramount, and signed with Paramount for 3 films, all in color, all in Technicolor.
Right, that's where you ended up in Beau Geste territory with Alan Ladd.
Yes.
Right?
In costumes. I love costumes. Most women hate costumes, but I love being squeezed by the corsets. I really did. I felt cared for and loved.
Well, to get back to that era with MGM, you appeared with Jean Hagen several times.
Yes, she was a fine actress.
And another one whom I think underrated, never able to break free, although she was in the Western, I guess. She was in Ambush with you too, right?
Yes, but we never had scenes together. You know, she was waiting in the next room when I was doing my scene and vice versa. But she did a film that I turned down after Three Little Words, which has become a classic now. And she was playing the woman who, the star, going into the talkies and shouldn't have spoken because she sang. I didn't want to play the role with a Brooklyn accent, which I didn't have. I had Swedish accents, Norwegian accents, Irish accents, but I didn't have a Brooklynese accent. So I turned the role down, and she did a fabulous job. And that was in color.
You were offered Singing in the Rain first?
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you imagine?
Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I say I never have regrets, but that could be a borderline.
Oh, isn't that something?
Mm-hmm. I thought, what am I doing playing a star that can't speak except to send everybody running for cover?
Right.
And I didn't have a Brooklyn accent. I couldn't imagine that I could speak like that. Nor would I want to.
Chalk on the blackboard.
My agent was then trying to get me out of the contract with MGM, but both Comden and Green wanted me for that part. Why they saw me in that part, I don't know, but I'm sorry I didn't do it. I could have worked with a diction coach and said, I can't stand it. But I didn't, and I'm sorry in a way that I didn't, because that is one of the best musicals of all time.
Well, you should have listened to Betty and Adolph.
I should have. I should have.
Well, is that one of the, when you say that Mayer left and Dory Sherry took over, is that one of the reasons that Kelly's career kind of grew dimmer as the 50s progressed?
Well, of course, because the musicals were cut. I was supposed to do something called, because Mayer wouldn't let me do, with Joe Ferrer, wouldn't let me do the film of Cyrano, which was scheduled to go at Columbia in color, Technicolor, and I had already been fitted for wigs and costumes and everything, and Mayer got the contract on a Thursday afternoon, and because the shooting was supposed to start at Columbia on Monday, everything on Thursday starts. Everything on filming starts on Monday, and all the problems start on Thursday, I guess, before the shooting. Anyway, there was a paragraph in the contract that Mayer was supposed to sign that was a television paragraph, that it would be eventually on television or something. Well, Mayer, at that time, television was the ogre, and if you were on television, you couldn't expect a screen career at all, or vice versa. So he wouldn't sign it. So they got a contract player at Columbia to replace me. The film was never made in color. It was made in black and white. But Joe won the Academy Award for it anyway. And I eventually got to do it on Broadway with him, to spectacular notices. I spent 2 weeks on Broadway with Joe, who directed it, and I really loved doing Roxanne. I really did. And that was his present to me, because I lost the role on the screen.
Oh, that is a shame. I can picture you as Roxanne.
It should have been made in color anyway.
Yes.
But it changed to black and white overnight.
He's another talent that is unappreciated today, Jose Ferrer.
Yes.
Arlene, in switching to Paramount as you did and getting some of those roles that you were doing, I'm struck again that you weren't being taken advantage of, your talent. And I'm thinking of Bengal Brigade with Rock Hudson. Which
that was for Universal.
Oh, that was Universal. But it was the same. You window dressing.
They were all color. They were all Technicolor.
And they were taking advantage of your hair.
Yes.
Well, within that period again, where you were in Bengal Brigade and Desert Legion and that, and even though they were major films with stars like Ladd and Rock Hudson and that, were you feeling any frustration again?
Yes, I was after my agent to get me a dramatic part. I didn't care if it was in color anymore, because most of the dramatic parts were in black and white, as you said earlier. And the next film I got after that, after I did Woman's World, was in London for Columbia. It was called Portrait and Smoke, but later changed to Wicked as They Come. Yes, terrible title. Anyway, it was from the book Portrait and Smoke, but the director discovered, after my having practiced for 6 or 8 weeks because I didn't smoke, how to make it look like I was smoking. I fooled all my friends, but I couldn't fool the director, so he put a glass of champagne in my hand instead. So thus the change in the title, instead of Portrait and Smoke. That went up in smoke, and it was called Wicked as They Come instead.
There's when Anthony Mann did I think it's his masterpiece called Man of the West in 1958 with Gary Cooper and Julie London.
Yes.
And there was an article, it's a real cult film now, and there was an article not that long ago in which the writer talked that it's unfortunate that Julie London played the lead, and you were one of the actresses he mentioned that could have been far better at the role. I don't know if you ever heard that story. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie.
No, I haven't, but I've heard about it.
And in fact, there was talk of making the character different, but they were afraid that Julie London couldn't handle it, so they didn't do it. In doing Woman's World, how did Woman's World come about?
Well, I knew the Brackett's very well, the writer, director, and I knew them socially. And I think it came from Charlie Brackett. I think that's who told the director that he would like to see me in the role. And therefore, I was cast. And I think Jean Peters was mentioned, who was under contract at the time. And I don't know why she didn't do it. But in any case, this was, I thought, the best part in the script, the best woman's part.
Yeah, it's Van Heflin is your husband, not you.
And I'm a Texas bitch.
Yeah, right. You're pushing him.
You can say that on radio, I hope.
Yes, you're pushing him.
Very ambitious.
Yes.
Texas bitch.
Yeah.
Very ambitious for her husband and therefore for herself.
Arlene, as big a hit as Women's World was, and it was a huge hit, a couple of years later you did a sci-fi fantasy based on Jules Verne novel, Journey to the Center of the Earth, which was an even bigger hit.
Well, that's become somewhat of a classic. I get fan mail from all over the world, and one of their favorite films is Journey to the Center of the Earth. And it wasn't digitally enhanced at that time. I mean, they did their best, but today, what they could have done with it. But it still holds up today.
And I understand that you almost died during the filming of it.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, I almost drowned when I was 5, and they had to call the pull motor and everything else. So I've always been afraid of water, and I really was almost put out of my life at 5. So I've always been afraid of water. So when we had a sequence in the middle of the earth where the sea is surrounding us and our small little boat is going around in a circle, a blooper that's supposed to come through to my back comes to my face, and all the water falls into my face, and I regress, and I faint, and I go into being 5 again, and I'm taken to the hospital. I'm out of it. I've really out of it, and I wake up and I see Pat Boone and James Mason looking down at me very seriously, and I thought, gee, this wasn't in the script that I remember. And I'm in a hospital bed. They were very, very, very concerned. But the next day I was okay again. There was a miscalculation of the blooper that was supposed to hit my back, not my face. So anyway, they got what they wanted. A surprised look on my face, I'm sure, in the film. And we didn't have to do it again, luckily.
You know what strikes me especially about that is the interplay between you and James Mason. It's just wonderful, the adult back and forth.
It's interesting that you should say that, because James did not want me for the role. I found that out before I played the first scene with him. And I really worked on that character because I really wanted to be up to playing opposite James Mason, who was noted for, he was such a fine actor in England and then transferred to America and Hollywood. Anyway, I was a little concerned with coming up to his level, or trying to, as an actress. And so I really prepared for that role. And the first scene, I knew he didn't want me. I did tell him I knew that, but I really gave it to him on that first scene. And I saw the surprised look on his face when he returned the lines to me. And I thought, maybe I've hit him with this, maybe I'll change his mind. Well, afterwards, after we played that first scene together, he came to my dressing room and he knocked on the door and he said, "Miss Dahl, may I speak with you?" It was never Arlene. "Miss Dahl, may I speak with you?" And I said, "Of course, Mr. Mason." And he said, "You know, I didn't want you for this role." And I said, "I know." He said, "How did you know?" And I said, "I found out." He said, "Well, I was wrong." He said, "You're a fine actress and we're going to have fun on this film." That again was like receiving the Oscar.
Oh, what a great story. Because
praise from Caesar.
You guys are just terrific together. Watching it, I think it's unfortunate you never got a chance to do something like Indiscreet with a James Mason or a Cary Grant or something.
Yes.
You're just, in fact, I was saying to Steve before we started, if Hitchcock hadn't had a blonde fetish, and that you'd have been terrific in Vertigo or some of those.
My friend Grace got all those parts. Blondes do have more fun, especially with Hitchcock.
Well, maybe Tippi Hedren could argue about that, but in The Birds. But if we just could touch on your noir period in the mid-50s. You made a series of films which you were dark, wicked, and with people like Jack Hawkins, John Payne, good little films. And were they ones that you sought out, that you were frustrated?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I changed agents. It's always easy for an agent to take the best role with the most money first without really scraping, really going out and looking for a dramatic role. I'm not even convinced that my agents thought that I could act or should do the dark roles. But I changed agents, and the agent got me the first role that I told you about, Portrait in Smoke, which was a fantastic role from a beauty contest winner to a murderess, or someone who was being tried for murder, and how she came up to meet all these men in her life as a stepping stone to greater things, including money and social position, and ending up killing her last husband by mistake, thinking he was a burglar. And I did this with Philip Carey, and it was really a wonderful experience because Ken Hughes was a director. I worked at Shepperton. I'd never done a film in London before, and Mike Frankovich was the head of Columbia at that time, and he wanted me for this role. I don't know what film he saw that made him think I'd be right for it, but I'm glad he did, and I'm glad for the chance to have done this role. It's been on television, I think, once or twice, but not a lot. And there's one I did with Jack Hawkins called She Played with Fire by Sidney Gilead. The two producers who produced a lot of the top films in London at the time, Sidney Gilead. And it's going to be on TCM in July, I believe, for the first time. They inherited She Played with Fire, and I get this from the horse's mouth, or rather Bob Osborne's mouth, because he told me that he selected it as one of his picks for July.
It's typical that Frank Launder, Sidney Gilead stuff.
Sidney Gilead, Frank Launder, exactly.
It's they did, I think, Green for Danger and Night Train to Munich, Lady Vanishes.
Mm-hmm. They were very well thought of as much as Charlie Bracken and his group were. They were partners, and they were very well thought of in London, and had great success with this type of film.
Yeah, and what was it like working with Jack Hawkins, one of the great voices of all time?
Yes, he was very much a gentleman. He was happily married, so there was never any question of flirting or anything. But he was a different kind of actor. You know, the British are very reserved, and he was very reserved. I never felt any heat coming my way from him. He wasn't freezing me out, but he was sort of halfway there. So it was difficult for me to get into the role, but we became friendly, and I think his wife, who was on the set, may have had something to do with his delivery on this film. But we really, I think we did very well in that. But she was on the set most of the time, so I think this was a little intimidating for him to really show his feelings.
Was that shot in London too?
Yes, Shepperton.
And then also at this period you did a James Cain, Slightly Scarlet.
Yes, that was one of my best roles.
Oh, you're terrific in
it. Jailbird, kleptomaniac, sex maniac. The character was childlike, and she was full of the devil because she was trying to irritate her sister on every count because she resented her sister, who was older. Naturally, I love playing the younger sister, Deronda Fleming. We have almost the same birthday. Her birthday is August 10th, and mine is the 11th. There is a difference in age between us, but this was brought out. And most of the people, who would confuse us. So we decided we wanted to do the roles so they would see we really didn't look alike. She's much taller and heavier set than I am. But, I don't know if we dissuaded people or persuaded people that we were different people, but we tried our best to do that. And we had fun. I love Rhonda, and we had fun making the film.
And you had worked with John Payne before that, right?
Yes,
and
at Paramount.
Caribbean, was that it?
Mm-hmm.
And was John Payne trying to change his career at the same time, too, from this nice guy sort of roles?
Yes, and exactly. And also, he had an accident on his back, and he was in great pain all through that film. So the frown you saw on his face in most of the scenes was because he was in deep pain, I think. He really injured his back. I'm not sure how. He explained it to me one day, but I don't remember. But he was, taking pain medicine all through that film.
Oh, it's a wonderful performance. I'm sorry that
Yes,
it was
it
based on reality.
He broke through that pain to make a very good performance.
Yeah, it's an underrated film noir.
It's the only film noir that was made in color.
Yeah, that's John Alton again.
Exactly.
Terrific, yeah. And then now, could you just tell us what Dirty Girls of Kathmandu is?
Le Chemin de Kathmandu,
yes.
The Way to Kathmandu.
Yes.
That was one of my 3 films that I made in France, in French. I was the only American actor in it. And I took it because I wanted to go to India. I'd always wanted to go to India. We filmed 6 weeks in Jaipur and New Delhi before we went to Kathmandu. And it was a wonderful travel experience for me, and I made great friends in India. And it was, I don't think it's ever been shown in America, but I have a print of it. The sound was not as good as our sound here that they did, because I don't know. I was asked to come back to re-record, which I did, in French and in English. But you see the film now, and it's like we were shooting in a windstorm. It's hard to hear what I have to say. But in any case, it was a wonderful experience because the director was one who did Joas, the Truth, which was a big success in France, and he was very well thought of as a director. And Jane Birkin was there. She was in the film, and she eventually married the musician who composed the music for the film.
Oh, well, it's something I have to look forward to now. I'll wait till it shows up on TCM.
Yes. Eventually, they all come to see TCM.
Arlene, thank you so much. You have been an utter delight. The hour seemed like 5 minutes. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Well, it's been fun chatting with you, and I hope you make some sense of what we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Can't wait, Arlene, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arlene.
Thank you, and thank John.
Okay, bye-bye.
Quiet. The stuff that dreams are made of.
Icons is a new monthly magazine based on larger-than-life personalities from the golden age of Hollywood. From Humphrey Bogart to Katharine Hepburn, to Gene Kelly to Lauren Bacall, Icons has the stuff you'll find in no other magazine. The inside stuff, the stuff that dreams are made of. Icons. They are forever.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And welcome back to the Icons Radio Hour. We've been talking to Arlene Dahl, and isn't she an honest, smart, and funny woman, John?
Oh, so undilutedly open about her career and career choices and the roles she was given. That's so refreshing to hear someone talk that way.
Oh, it is, and imagine how her career might have been different had Jack Warner not lost money in Monte Carlo and come back and re-signed her instead of her going over to MGM and Louis B. Mayer.
Yes, I'm sure a whole series of different roles, which means that she wouldn't have been the first choice in Singing in the Rain for her role, which she turned down, which I found just fascinating.
That's amazing. I mean, you think, because I've known Comden and Green for much of my life, and she should have listened to them, I think.
She admitted it.
At any rate, that's it for us for this week, John, and we will be back next week with another edition of the Icons Radio Hour. And until then, I'm Steve Bogart.
And I'm John Mulholland, and that's it for tonight.
And we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Icons Radio Hour with John Mulholland and Steve Bogart. Past broadcasts are available for download at www.iconsradio.com. Now, you can take your Icons Radio Hour mobile by downloading your show as a podcast at the Icons Radio website or at the iTunes Store at apple.com. Join us every week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another exciting edition of Icons Radio Hour. Good night, everyone.